clock in the control tower showed 2:37 a.m. The airport was silent except for the steady hum of the runway lights. I had worked enough night shifts to know when something felt wrong, and that night the air itself carried a strange heaviness. I scanned the monitors in front of me, checking the list of arrivals and departures. Flight 409 to Madrid had been cancelled hours ago. Yet on the far side of the tarmac, a plane sat with its lights on and engines faintly whirring. No crew had logged its return. No ground staff reported its arrival. I grabbed the radio. Control to ground. Do you see an aircraft on runway 7? Static answered. Then silence. I leaned closer to the glass. The plane looked ordinary at first glance, but the longer I stared, the more it unsettled me. Its windows glowed faintly, as if light pulsed from inside, but the cabin was dark one moment and strangely illuminated the next. I decided to check for myself. Leaving the tower, I walked across the service road and onto the cold stretch of asphalt. Each step echoed too loudly in the emptiness. The plane loomed larger with every stride. The air smelled of kerosene and something else, something metallic and old, like rust mixed with damp earth. As I reached the base of the stairs leading to the cabin door, I froze. The door creaked and began to open on its own. The hydraulic hiss echoed in the night. Whispers slipped out. They were low and indistinct, like many voices speaking at once, but none clear enough to understand. My chest tightened, and I forced myself to climb. Inside, the air was colder than outside. My flashlight beam cut across rows of seats. At first, they looked empty. Then I saw them. Figures sat scattered through the cabin, men and women of different ages. Their posture was natural, heads tilted as if waiting for a flight to begin. But none of them moved when the beam hit their faces. Their eyes did not blink. Their chests did not rise or fall. I swallowed hard and spoke. "Hello. Can anyone hear me?" No reaction. Not even a shift of attention. I reached for the intercom handset near the door, more out of instinct than logic. "Cockpit. This is control staff. Respond if you copy." The line hissed with empty static. Then, just for a second, I thought I heard laughter. I forced myself to walk down the aisle. As I passed each row, the whispers grew louder. Some figures seemed to turn slightly, though I could not be sure. When I reached the bulkhead door to the cockpit, I pushed it open. The seats were empty. The controls were dark, no crew, no instruments active. I tried the radio again, pressing the switch. "This is ground control. Identify this aircraft." Silence. Then a sudden sharp crack of static. When I turned back, the cabin behind me was empty. Every figure I had seen was gone. Only rows of vacant seats stretched back into the shadows. And then the lights flickered. The engines outside roared to life, though I had not seen anyone touch them. The floor vibrated under my boots. I stumbled toward the exit, but as I reached the door, it began to close by itself. I pulled hard, forcing it open just enough to slip through, and ran down the stairs. By the time I hit the tarmac, the plane's landing lights flared. The entire fuselage shimmered as if dissolving into the night. One blink, and it was gone. I stood alone on the runway, with only the faint smell of fuel hanging in the air, and the radio still hissing on my belt. I stood frozen, staring at the empty strip of asphalt. The plane had vanished without leaving a trace. No tire marks, no heat waves from the engines, nothing. Only silence. My radio crackled again. "Tower to ground, do you copy?" Finally, a voice. But it wasn't anyone I recognized. The tone was flat, mechanical, and slightly distorted. "This is control," I answered carefully. "Identify yourself." No reply, only static. I hurried back toward the tower. My hands shook as I swiped my badge and stepped inside. The monitors showed nothing unusual, no sign of the aircraft I had just seen. According to the system, runway 7 had been clear all night. I searched the flight logs. Flight 409 to Madrid. Cancelled, exactly as I remembered. But something caught my eye. The log included a footnote in faded gray text. It read, "Last recorded departure September 8, 1979. The hairs on my neck stood up. That was over 40 years ago. I dug deeper into the archives. The old records confirmed it. Flight 409 had taken off on that date and never arrived at its destination. The official report listed the aircraft as missing over the Atlantic. No wreckage was found. I sat back in the chair, my pulse pounding. The sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned quickly. A man stood near the door of the tower. He wore an outdated uniform, the kind of jacket I had only seen in old aviation photos. His face was pale, eyes hollow, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have boarded," he said in a low voice. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. He stepped closer, the air around him growing colder. The faint smell of fuel filled the room again. "Flight 409 never landed," he continued. "But it still returns." I backed toward the console. My hand instinctively reached for the radio, but when I pressed the button, his voice came through the speaker too, echoing with a delay, as if replayed from another time. "Some passengers never leave," the voice repeated through the static. I blinked and the man was gone. Only the empty doorway remained. The monitors flickered. For a split second, every screen displayed the same image, the interior of the ghostly plane with rows of silent passengers staring forward. Then the feed snapped back to normal. I couldn't stay. I grabbed my coat and left the tower, heart racing, every step heavy with dread. When I reached the parking lot, I looked back at the runway. The night was still and quiet, but a faint glimmer of lights shimmered far in the distance, like the silhouette of a plane ready to depart. I knew then that Flight 409 would keep returning, searching for passengers, and that I had narrowly escaped becoming one of them. But I also knew something worse. It had seen me, and it would come back. I worked the night shift at the airport baggage system. The place was always half lit, humming with belts and rollers, but empty of people. Nights felt longer there than anywhere else. Around 2 in the morning, I noticed a black suitcase circling back onto the conveyor. At first I thought someone placed it on the wrong belt. I pulled it off, set it aside, and returned to my station. 5 minutes later, it was back. Same spot, same slow spin on the rollers. I checked the tag, no name, no flight number, just a blank paper looped around the handle. That should have been impossible. Every bag had to be scanned and logged. I carried it to the storage rack reserved for unclaimed luggage. I placed it on the bottom shelf, locked the rack, and walked away. When I turned back, the rack was empty. The suitcase was already gliding along the conveyor again. Cold air touched my neck. I looked down the corridor. Nothing moved. I decided not to call anyone. Night shifts meant fewer questions if you handled things alone. I grabbed the suitcase again. This time I set it on the floor and kicked the emergency stop on the belt. Silence filled the hall. No machines, just my breathing. Then soft footsteps echoed behind me. I spun around. Nobody was there. Only long shadows thrown by the red emergency lights. The suitcase shifted. I swear I saw the handle lift a little, as if pulled upward. It slid forward across the floor. Slowly, then faster. I followed without knowing why. The bag led me past the main sorting area into a corridor usually locked. But the door stood open. The air smelled of dust and fuel. Lights flickered along the ceiling. I stepped inside. The suitcase moved ahead, bumping against corners, always staying just within sight. A voice whispered, so faint I thought it was in my head. I froze. The suitcase waited. Then the sound of footsteps came again, closer this time, echoing off metal walls. I told myself it was another worker, maybe a cleaner, but no one else should have been here. The corridor narrowed. Shadows stretched long and thin, bending in ways that didn't match any source. I reached a service stairwell. The suitcase was already at the top of the steps. Its handle twitched, like a hand had just let go. When I climbed, the sound of movement behind me grew clearer. It was not one set of steps, but many, fast, uneven, as if a crowd followed just out of sight. I refused to turn around. At the landing, a steel door creaked open on its own. The suitcase slid through. I stepped after it, heart hammering. Inside was a storage room I had never seen. Rows of metal shelves, old tags, broken carts. The air was cold, heavy. I tried to breathe quietly, but the sound seemed too loud in that silence. The suitcase stopped in the center of the floor. Lights above flickered, buzzing weakly. I reached for it. Then every shadow on the walls moved at once. The shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into shapes of people. Tall, short, hunched, all frozen in poses like they had been caught mid-step. None of them had faces, just blank, dark hollows where features should have been. The suitcase shook, then the zipper slid open on its own. I stepped back. No one touched it, yet the flap folded outward. Inside, nothing. Only darkness, deeper than it should have been, like a pit without a bottom. A sound rose from it, not a voice, not a machine, but something between a whisper and a breath. It made my skin crawl. I turned toward the door, but it had already closed. The handle rattled when I pulled. Locked. Behind me, the shadows shifted again. They pressed closer, stretching across the floor toward my feet. I tried to stay still, but every muscle in my body screamed to run. The suitcase moved first. It slid across the floor, circling me. Each time it stopped, the shadows drew nearer. A figure flickered at the edge of my vision. A man, or maybe a woman, but thin as paper, standing just beyond the light. I shouted, my voice echoing back at me like I had yelled into a tunnel. No answer, only the endless hum of the lights above. The suitcase snapped shut with a loud click. The shadows froze. My chest tightened. I realized the noise of footsteps had stopped as well. Then, one by one, the shelves around me began to scrape and shift. Old tags fluttered. Metal carts rolled forward without a push. The room was filling with the sound of motion, but I was still alone. I'd backed into the wall, keeping the suitcase in sight. The handle lifted again, jerking upward like something invisible held it. Then it dragged itself toward a smaller door at the far side of the room. The lock clicked open before I touched it. The suitcase slid inside. I followed, I don't know why. Some part of me felt like leaving it behind wasn't possible. The smaller room was darker, narrower. The air smelled of damp concrete. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping. I heard water echoing from somewhere below. The suitcase stopped in the middle. I crouched down, trying to look at it without touching. The zipper twitched, as if something inside was pushing against it. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow, deep, too close. I turned. For the first time I saw a shadow move without any light to cause it. It stepped forward. A figure shaped like a person, but flat, sliding across the wall until it broke free and stood on the floor. Others followed. 5, 10 more, peeling themselves from the surfaces around me. They had no faces, no voices, only the sound of shuffling feet. I tried the door. Locked again. The suitcase opened wide. Darkness spilled out, not like a shadow, but like liquid night crawling across the floor. It touched my shoes and the cold shot through me. The figures pressed closer. My back hit the wall. The darkness kept spreading until the whole floor rippled with it. I grabbed the suitcase, desperate to end it, maybe to throw it shut. But the moment my hands touched the handle, every light in the room went out. I felt myself pulled forward. The floor was gone. The walls were gone. My body slid into that impossible black. The last thing I saw was the suitcase closing tight in front of me. Then nothing. By the time the morning shift arrived, the corridors were empty. The belts ran as usual. Only one thing was missing, me and the suitcase. The alarm started at 2:17 in the morning. Not a fire alarm, not an intruder siren. Just the low droning buzz of the old system in the closed terminal. I had been assigned to patrol the eastern wing, a part of the airport that had been shut down for years. Travelers never walked there anymore. The last flight had left in 2005, and since then the hall stood in silence, lit only by dim maintenance lamps. I took the flashlight from my belt and began walking past rows of plastic chairs. Dust clung to everything. The monitors that once displayed flight numbers were dead, but the faint hum of electricity still lingered in the wires above. At first, it was nothing unusual. The alarm often glitched, old wiring, humidity, rats in the ceiling. But then I heard it. Steps. Light, rapid, like a child running. I stopped. The beam of my flashlight froze on a tiled wall. I held my breath. The steps echoed again, somewhere ahead. The terminal was supposed to be locked tight. I moved forward. Each step I took sounded louder than it should have, as if the empty building amplified the noise. A faint sound reached me, not just steps, crying, high-pitched, like a small child in pain. I gripped the radio on my chest, pressed the button, and spoke quietly. "Control, this is Patrol 4. Do you have anyone logged inside the East Terminal?" Static answered me. Then a short crackle, no words. The crying grew sharper. I turned the corner into the waiting area, but the seats were empty. My light swept across rows of windows. Nothing. Then, in the glass, I saw movement. Figures. A man in a suit, a woman carrying a bag, a little boy with a toy plane in his hand. They were clear in the reflection, moving as if they were hurrying to a flight. But when I spun around, the hall behind me was empty. I felt a tightness in my chest. My mouth went dry. I walked backwards slowly, keeping the reflection in my sight. The figures kept walking. They passed through seats, through walls, until they vanished at the edge of the glass. The crying stopped. Only the buzz of the lights remained, flickering above me. I forced myself to continue toward the exit doors. If this was some trick of the brain, some mix of exhaustion and bad lighting, I needed air. The sliding doors opened with a hiss. I stepped forward. Instead of the parking lot, water spread before me. Endless, dark, swallowing everything. The ground was gone. I froze on the threshold. The water reached almost to my boots. In the black distance, I saw the outlines of aircraft. Dozens of them, half sunk, their wings tilted, noses pointing into the abyss. The air smelled of salt and metal. Then came the sound. Engines. Far away at first, then closer, roaring as if jets were landing all at once. The water rippled. I turned to retreat into the terminal, but the doors slid shut. My fists hammered against the glass, but it did not move. Behind me, the engines grew deafening. I could almost see the lights cutting through the fog above the water. Screams joined the roar, hundreds of voices, overlapping, fading in and out. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the water was gone. The doors were open. I stood on dry tile. The empty hall stretched behind me. The alarm had stopped, and I was alone again. I stood still, gripping the flashlight until my fingers ached. The silence pressed against my ears. It felt too heavy, too absolute, as if the world outside the terminal had vanished. I forced myself to breathe. My radio crackled again, faint, broken. A voice slipped through, distorted. Report. Status. Copy. I raised it to my mouth. "This is Patrol 4. Something's wrong in the East Terminal. I need backup." The line cut into static. No confirmation, no comfort. I began walking back through the hall, but the building no longer looked the same. The walls seemed darker, the lights weaker. The air smelled damp, almost rotten. Drops of water clung to the glass as if rain had fallen inside. As I moved past one of the gates, I noticed something strange. The display screen above the counter flickered. It showed a flight number. I knew for a fact the system was disconnected. Yet there it was, Flight 708, boarding. The letters shifted, as if the screen itself struggled to hold them steady. A whisper brushed my ear. A woman's voice. "Boarding now. Hurry." I spun around. No one. Only rows of chairs and a corridor that stretched too far, longer than I remembered. I followed it anyway, because every instinct told me that leaving through the main exit was impossible. My steps echoed, but now there were others. They followed close behind, quick, uneven. When I turned, shadows filled the glass walls again. People dragging bags, walking fast, their faces blurred. None of them existed outside the reflection. I gritted my teeth and kept moving until I reached another set of doors. These opened into a tunnel that led to one of the old boarding bridges. It was supposed to be locked. Instead, the lock hung broken, dangling. Cold air rushed at me. Damp, heavy, carrying the same salt smell. I stepped inside. The bridge swayed slightly even though nothing touched it. Fog pressed against the windows. Through it, I could see the outline of a plane waiting. Nose dipped into black water, tail barely visible. Every light in the bridge went out. My flashlight cut through the dark. Ahead, a child stood. Small frame, head lowered, hands clutching a stuffed bear. I froze. My throat tightened. "Hey, are you lost?" My voice sounded hollow, useless. The child raised its head. Eyes black, mouth open, no sound coming out. Behind me, the roar of engines shook the tunnel. The glass trembled, cracks spreading across it. Water splashed against the sides, as if the ocean itself slammed into the structure. I ran. My boots slammed the metal floor, my flashlight bouncing. The child stood still, shrinking into the fog until it vanished. I reached the end of the bridge and threw myself at the exit. The door gave way, and I stumbled into the terminal again. Only this time, the terminal was flooded. Water reached my knees, cold and rising fast. Chairs floated, bumping into walls. The flight monitors sparked and hissed. Through the glass, I saw faces pressed against the other side. Dozens of them, mouths open, screaming soundlessly. Their hands smacked the glass in unison, begging to be let in or maybe to drag me out. The water rose to my chest. My radio fizzed violently, a single phrase forcing its way through. "Don't close your eyes." The roar of engines thundered again. The ceiling lights burst, sparks raining down. I closed my eyes anyway. When I opened them, I was back at the beginning, standing on dry tiles. The alarm buzzing softly. It was 2:17 again. My watch confirmed it. Time had reset. The glass walls were clean. The chairs were dry. No faces, no water, no child. Only silence. I don't know if I ever left that moment. Maybe I am still there, walking the halls of the drowned terminal, trapped between alarms and echoes of flights that never took off. I only know one thing. Every night at 2:17, I hear the engine start again.